My favorite light setup so far. One of the biggest issues that we found over the years is lighting. There's all different ways that you can get lighting on your project as you're carving. But if you want it on your actual router, what we've done in the past is a lot of different things. The last one that we had done is fairy lights, and those worked okay, but they're still not quite great. Mike Kaufman sent me some pictures of what he did with this little strip light thing from Harbor Freight, how he took it apart. And this thing, you guys have seen them. If you've been in Harbor Freight at the counter, you've seen these things. They're super cheap. I don't know, $3 or $4 a piece, whatever it is. And how he took this apart and actually made a lighting system for his router. That's what we're gonna do today. So here's what you're gonna need to get this done. First of all, the light. Again, this is just a Harbor Freight light. It's got 2 strips in there. You'll see that in a minute here. I use Starbond in one part of it. I use 2-sided tape, this 3M extreme mounting tape. I really love this stuff. A little Dremel tool with a cutting disc on it. That works really good. A razor knife, this little skew. You might use this, you might not. Just something to mark on the back of it. And then some diagonals, and then a really tiny screwdriver. You can use a hand screwdriver. I've just got a really tiny one set up in my drill for speed. So let's get started.
So when you get your light, the first thing you want to do is turn it on and off. Make sure it works. And you'll notice that Dad does this throughout the whole process. Every process, he turns it on and off to make sure all the connections are there. Then you're going to take the label off the back, and we use a little knife to score the edges to make sure that you can get into those battery boxes. Then you're going to want to remove the 4 screws in the corners, and that's going to take the outer piece off and allow that to disconnect. And then once you have that off, there's 2 more little screws in the middle, and that'll get the rest of that off to where you can actually access the little light strips. Once that's done, there's 4 little rivet type things that are connecting those light strips to that reflective plastic piece. And you just got to grind those down a little bit with that cutting disc. And they come off really easy, but you want to be careful because this is all thin plastic and you don't want to go all the way through and ruin those light strips. And again, turn the lights on and off through every step just to make sure that all the connections are working. So now what you're going to do is you're going to mark around the battery packets where you're going to cut out, because you're going to cut each one of these out, and you can go along that screw hole there and just cut that area out, because that's what you're actually going to stick to the housing of your router. And you're going to be able to do it to where when the batteries go bad, you can change them without having to disconnect everything. And both those battery packets have little fins on the top. You're going to want to cut those off too and make it flat, because that's the part you're going to stick to your housing. Now, to get the lights to stick to the inside of your router housing, you're going to use that 3M tape. So you want to cut a piece that's the same length as those strips of lights, and one piece should do you, because once you put it on one strip like Dad has here, then he's just going to cut that in half and put it on the other strip. But make sure to leave the red tape on the top until you're ready to stick those on, because this stuff is pretty sticky and it will get all the dust and sawdust and everything, and it'll be useless by the time you're ready to actually attach it. Now every router housing is different, so make sure you kind of get an idea of where you want to put these battery packs so they're not in the way before you actually stick them on there. So Dad's done a DeWalt before, so he has a pretty good idea of where he wants them to be. So you're just going to put that 3M tape on the rounded side of that battery pack and attach them to the router housing. Remember, it's important that you want to have access to the batteries. That way, when the batteries go dead, you don't have to take this whole thing apart in order to change them.
So something I just learned, guys, is these metal tabs coming out of the battery case, don't let them hit the metal, because it will short that thing out and cause kind of an arc kind of going on, and the lights then won't go on. They'll be kind of, and the batteries will get warm. So just be careful of that. Just I bent this one up. It was down touching the base here, and the lights wouldn't go on. I think it was arcing. So you bend those things up and don't let them hit your router housing.
Attaching the light strips to the inside of the router housing is kind of a pain, especially because me and Dad have these fat little sausage fingers. We're not exactly nimble. But really all you got to do is pull the red piece off of that 3M tape, and then those light strips will bend. So just kind of set them in there and press them nice and tight up against that housing.
All right guys, so here's what I'm going to do on the switch. On some of them I brought it clear over around, but this one the wire is a little bit shorter, so I'm going to Starbond it right there in place, so then I can flip that switch back and forth and it's not going to be in the way of me carving at all. So that's what I'm going to do here.
We weren't sure how Starbond was going to react with like the wires and stuff, but apparently, don't quote me on this, but apparently Starbond is actually conductive. We glued a piece of wire back onto one of the strips with Starbond too, and it worked great. There was no problems at all. Now we just put the router back together and you're good to go. Now for me personally, I don't really like this. I think it's a little bit cumbersome, it's a little bit bulky, and I don't really need that extra light. But if that's something you struggle with, give this a shot and see if it works. If it doesn't, you can always take it back off.
A couple things that you want to keep in mind, guys. These things are super fragile. When you pulling these things apart, you got those little tiny wires. There's been a couple of them where those wires have come loose and I've had to reattach them or just throw it away altogether. So just take your time. Don't be in a hurry on this, and just be aware of those wires and be really careful that you don't pull any of those wires off. But after you do it a time or two, it's not that big a deal. It just is a process that is not real quick. So take your time and just don't rush through it. Thanks again to Mike Kaufman for sharing this with me. I've done now, I think 3 or 4 of my routers this way, and I really like it. Ryan, I'm not so sure. He's kind of up in the air whether he likes it or not. But you might give it a try. If you don't like it, you can always take it back off. You can always use a little desk lamp or a little auxiliary lighting on your bench that you can clamp on. There's so many different, we have a whole video on lighting, on getting lighting. The link to the lighting video will be in the description below, so go check that out. Thanks again, guys. If you need any supplies, the router base, this base plate is our product. It's over on our website, makeawoodsign.com, along with router bits and hundreds of other products. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We love you. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.